Today, we are going to talk about the most violent country in the world, El Salvador. When we think of El Salvador, we think of Salvadoran gangs, migrant caravans, and the highest homicide rates in the world. And this is just the tip of the iceberg. To give you an idea, El Salvador's homicide rate is comparable to that of countries that are at war. In 2015, the homicide rate in this country was 1 homicide per 1,000 people. To put that in perspective, more people are murdered in El Salvador than die in road accidents. We are talking about the land of the Maras. And what are the Maras? Well, they are ultra-violent street gangs. They're usually dedicated to drug trafficking. The members are distinguished from each other by the tattoos that typically cover their entire bodies. The two most important gangs are the Mara Salvatrucha and the Mara Barrio 18. To give you an idea of the magnitude of the problem, it is estimated that Barrio 18 has between 50,000 and 100,000 members. And we're not just talking about violence. A third of Salvadorans live on less than $5.50 a day. Remittances sent by immigrants account for almost 20% of the country's entire GDP. In other words, we're talking about one of the most dismal countries to live in the world. However, what if I told you that all of this is changing? Yes, indeed. From time to time, characters capable of changing the course of history appear. And this video is about to introduce you to one such protagonist. The new Latin American rock star. We are talking about Nayib Bukele, the president of El Salvador. If you're watching this video from Europe, Bukele's name probably won't ring any bells. But believe me, in Latin America, he is the new messiah. And the truth is that he is a unique character. Within just 2 years of his presidency, he has managed to reduce crime by half. Not even the coronavirus has managed to lower his popularity levels. He is a revolutionary, but not the classic leftist revolutionary. Bukele is one of the youngest leaders in Latin America. He is 39 years old and continuously active on social media, and he's not afraid to make drastic decisions. To give you an idea, he just announced that Bitcoin will be legal tender in El Salvador. So brace yourself, El Salvador, for a bunch of people from Reddit coming to visit. However, despite all his achievements, the United States does not trust him. Check this out.
US senators ask Biden to put pressure on President Bukele, Voice of America.
So what is wrong with Nayib Bukele? I'm sure many of you are already imagining it. It's not the first time that Latin America has fallen for a new messiah who promises miracles and ends up becoming a tyrant. And the truth is that there are many indications that Bukele could turn El Salvador into a dictatorship. So the questions we are asking today are, what is Bukele up to in El Salvador? Are we talking about the hero this country really needs, or is he just another aspiring tyrant? Today, we will answer all of these questions. But first, before we get started, I want to remind you that we have a newsletter dedicated exclusively to the geopolitics of Latin America. I'm talking about LATAMPolitik. For only $5 a month, you will receive 3 newsletters every week where we will explain the geopolitics of Latin America. In other words, for the cost of a Big Mac meal deal in Colombia, you can get an in-depth knowledge of facts that do not typically appear in conventional media. Stories that get lost in the noise of everyday life, such as, for example, the real influence of China on the continent, trade conflicts between Argentina and Uruguay, or oil in Guyana. All this in the style of VisualPolitik in collaboration with the consulting firm Perch Perspectives. So, don't wait any longer. Go visit latampolitik.com to subscribe. And for now, let's get back to El Salvador and take a little look at some history.
A star is born.
The first question you might be asking yourself is, where does the name Nayib Bukele come from? I mean, Nayib sounds more like an Arab name, right? Well, you are correct. Bukele's family comes from Palestine. This may seem like a side note, but it is yet another symbol of how far removed this man is from conventional politics. You will rarely see him in a suit and tie, but his differences go far beyond image and genealogy. To fully understand this figure, we have to know a little about the history of El Salvador. You see, back in 1979, the Salvadoran army carried out a coup d'etat and established a military junta in the country. This is how a civil war broke out between the leftist guerrillas, the so-called Farabundo Marti National Liberation Front, or the FMLN, and the military. This war did not end until 1992 and left more than 75,000 dead in its wake. In 1992, the two sides went from confronting each other on the streets to confronting each other at the ballot box. But in reality, nothing much really changed. Violence in the streets and corruption in government offices. By 2015, El Salvador broke its own record homicide rate, and neither of the two major parties seemed willing to do anything to change it. However, on the 3rd of October 2018, things did change forever.
En respeto a la ley, Hoy damos inicio a nuestra campaña electoral.
Bukele's story is a curious one. He began his political career in the FMLN, that is, in the left-wing party, and that's how he won the mayor's office in San Salvador. However, in 2017, he was kicked out of the party. Under normal circumstances, that would have been the end of his career. But this is the 21st century, and these days, politicians have a tool that few know how to use well: social media. The internet allows us to have our own means of communication without depending on third parties. Some politicians like Donald Trump and Alexei Navalny have understood this well. But, without a doubt, Nayib Bukele has managed to turn digital communication into an art form. Thanks to social media, Bukele did not lose contact with his voters. And that was how he announced his campaign and his new party in 2018, Nuevas Ideas, the New Ideas Movement. And you're probably thinking, seriously? Is it really that easy to set up a political party overnight? If any of you watching this video have experience in politics, you already know that setting up a political party is pretty complicated. One charismatic candidate is not enough. You need to organise the base of affiliates, plan campaigns, etc. So how did Nayib Bukele create his party? Well, in a masterful way, by opting for one that already existed. That's right, Bukele joined a minority right-wing party, Ghana. The strategy worked perfectly.
Bukele breaks El Salvador's two-party hold on power, ASCOA.
That's right, Bukele won by absolute majority. That is, despite coming from a minority party, he won more than 50% of the votes. And that's how he left the other two parties in a corner. And all of this, only 37 years old. So what was his first political act? Well, seconds before taking the oath of office, before saying a single word, he took out his cell phone and took a selfie to post on Twitter. And you may ask, but what was his electoral vision? What did Bukele promise to Salvadorans to make them fall in love with him in this way? Well, it's very simple.
Lo mismo pasa con la corrupción. Cuando llegan al gobierno, roban porque así lo han hecho siempre. Ven la corrupción como algo normal. Son los mismos de siempre y su vieja forma de hacer política. Porque el dinero alcanza cuando nadie roba.
It may seem like a very simple slogan, but it was something totally new in El Salvador's politics. To give you an idea, of the last 4 presidents this country has had, 3 have been involved in million-dollar corruption scandals. So the hashtag return the loot, but in Spanish, I'm not even going to attempt that, sounded like music to the ears. And we're not just talking about domestic politics. In September of 2019, Bukele gave his first official speech at the United Nations. And what do you think he did? Well, before he uttered a single word, when he was already up at the lectern, he took a selfie and uploaded it to Instagram. To give you an idea, Bukele has 3 million followers on Twitter and 2 million on Instagram. These may seem like usual numbers for a political reader, but remember that the population of El Salvador is only 6.4 million people. That's the equivalent of almost half of the country following him on social media. As you can see, we're talking about a political rock star, but the most important thing about Bukele is not his personality, but his actions. And this is where the least attractive part of his mandate comes in. We're going to take a look at that now.
A firm hand.
Beyond corruption and poverty, El Salvador's main problem is violence. We could say that the Salvadoran Maras are a parallel state. They live beyond the law, and there are hardly any police who dare to stand up to them. You could say that Salvadoran cities are a war zone, where the gangs have taken over large territories under their control. So, under the hashtag territorial control plan, Bukele deployed 2,500 officers and 3,000 soldiers to the country's capital. The objective was to recover 12 territories controlled by the Maras. From day one to the next, the police conducted controls of weapons, drugs and tattoos. Think about it. Gang members are easily recognizable because they have symbolic tattoos. For example, members of the Mara Savarucha are tattooed with an M and an S in Gothic letters. The police arrested thousands of criminals. So far, everything sounds pretty good. So where did the controversy come from? Well, the controversy arises in the way they go about it. For example, the police did not limit themselves to arresting the offenders, but also took them to public squares to publicly shame them. And you're probably thinking now, so is the Iron Fist approach working, at least? Well, at the moment, it kinda seems to be. To give you an idea, the homicide rate in 2015 was 101 per 100,000 inhabitants. In 2018, it was 51, and in 2019, it was down to 36. At the moment, El Salvador is experiencing the lowest levels of violence since the end of the Civil War. That being said, El Salvador is still an extremely dangerous country. And the same goes for corruption. 3 months after Bukele being sworn in, El Salvador launched the International Commission Against Impunity, the so-called CICIES. Sissies, I guess. In this way, conflicts of interest would be avoided. In In fact, we have to recognize that Nayib Bukele has been able to attract multi-million-dollar donations thanks to his style of politics. For example, the Warren Buffett Foundation donated $25 million to the Salvadoran police. Under normal circumstances, almost all of this money would have gone into the pockets of some politician. In this case, however, that $25 million paid for El Salvador's first forensic investigation center. For the first time in the history of this country, the police will be able to do DNA tests in order to solve crimes. And at this point, you might be wondering, so how has he managed the coronavirus? Well, in this respect, we would also have to give Bukele a round of applause. El Salvador was one of the first countries to act. In March of 2020, when there was only a few cases in the country, El Salvador quarantined itself. To give you an idea, at the time of making this video, El Salvador has had 14% of the population vaccinated. Not a spectacular number compared to the United States. But remember that we are talking about one of the poorest countries in Latin America. El Salvador is much further ahead than other South American countries like Argentina, Panama, or Colombia, and all of this explains why Bukele's popularity is unstoppable. And a whopping 88% of Salvadorans are very satisfied with his administration. But his popularity is not limited to El Salvador. In international politics, Bukele has managed to achieve the impossible. His first trip as president was to Washington, D.C. There he met with Trump's national security advisor and openly criticized China. This happened in March 2019. Months later, in December 2019, he met with Xi Jinping in China. From that trip, he secured multi-million-dollar investment. China is going to build a sports stadium, a library, a water treatment plant, and a vacation resort. In other words, Bukele is getting investment from everywhere. China, the United States, Japan, and of course, the $389 million loan from the International Monetary Fund for coronavirus relief. In other words, he looks like a new Winston Churchill, doesn't he? So, what is wrong with Nayib Bukele? Why do we say that he, like Churchill, is a controversial figure? Well, let's take a look at that now.
Bukele's dark side.
On the surface, it looks like Bukele is doing a fantastic job in the fight against crime. But if we look at the past, we see that this is not the first time the homicide rate has dropped in El Salvador. Take a look at this graph. Here you can see how in the year 2012, the number of homicides also dropped dramatically because the gangs had reached a truce. Once the truce was over, violence increased again. What's more, if you look closely, you will see how homicides peaked in 2015 but began to fall before Bukele's victory. In other words, can we really say that Bukele's iron fist is working? With the data in hand, it's still too early to say. What we can say for sure is that Bukele's firm hand is much more than propaganda. Check this out.
Bukele authorizes police to kill gang members in El Salvador after bloody weekend. El País.
But wait a minute, because that's not all. Another of Bukele's strategies to end the violence has been negotiation. In September 2020, the newspaper El Faro published this investigative piece.
Bukele has been negotiating with MS-13, a Salvadorian gang, for a reduction in homicides and electoral support. ifearrow.net.
This newspaper has presented leaked documents that show details of this negotiation. Both sides have negotiated privileges for gang members in prison in exchange for reduction in murders and support for Bukele in the upcoming elections. As you can imagine, all of this clashes with Bukele's campaign promises that he would never negotiate with criminals. And what happened to the newspaper that investigated these negotiations? What happened to El Faro? Well, they're already under investigation by the government for possible money laundering. Bukele has also publicly criticized media critical of his government, such as the Associated Press. But I know what many of you are thinking. For the moment, we are only talking about minor issues. Bukele is neither the first nor the last politician to criticize media that criticizes him. And you are right. What is starting to be of concern is the following.
Heavily armed police and soldiers enter El Salvador Parliament. BBC.
And now I know what you're thinking. Is this a coup d'etat in El Salvador? Well, no, not really. It was Nayib Bukele himself who sent the army to the parliament. And why, you may ask? Very simple. The government wanted to get a loan of $109 million approved in order to modernize the police. They wanted to buy helicopters, patrol cars, and surveillance equipment. As popular as Bukele is, he does not have the support of the parliament. Remember that he won a presidential election, but the parliament was still dominated by the two big traditional parties. So Bukele sent in the army to intimidate them into approving the loan. This occurred in February 2020. 1 year later, in February 2021, El Salvador held parliamentary elections. And as you can imagine, the traditional parties were practically left outside. With so much popular support, Bukele has swept the floor. To give you an idea, the Legislative Assembly of El Salvador has 84 deputies. Well, 64 of them are Bukele's allies, and only 20 are from the opposition. So what has Bukele done with so much power in parliament? Check this out.
El Salvador's parliament sacks the country's top judges, The Economist.
And now I know what a lot of you are thinking. In a country as corrupt as is El Salvador. It is normal that Bukele wants to purge all the judges that were appointed during the previous governments, and you are right. But it is also true that this way of doing politics is becoming more and more authoritarian. Right now, Bukele has control of the executive, the legislature, and the judiciary. So this is something that we should condemn him for? Well, in some respects, no. No one can argue that Bukele is extremely popular in the country, and he has won elections. But the concentration of power is always bad news. And that explains why the US is wary of ending up supporting a would-be tyrant. I mean, they've been burned before. Check this out.
US to pull El Salvador funds on deep concerns over recent dismissals of top judges. Reuters.
So, is this a good or a bad decision? The truth is that it's very hard to say. On the one hand, it is clear that El Salvador needed a drastic change in its politics. It is difficult to end corruption in a country if all the old elites are against you. On the other hand, it would not be the first time that a messianic leader emerges in Latin America who ends up becoming a tyrant. So now, the question is over to you. Do you think it's a good thing the United States or the European Union put pressure on Nayib Bukele to prevent him from becoming a dictator? Or maybe some heavy-handedness is needed for a while so the country can put an end to crime and corruption? What are your thoughts? You can leave your answers in the comments below. As always, don't forget that here on VisualPolitik we release new videos every week, so subscribe, hit the little bell button down there so you don't miss any of our videos. If you like this video, please give it a like, and I'll see you next time.